We are live on the internet, on the web page, and we welcome those folks. The agenda is before you, and I would ask first of all if any member of council has a declaration of pecuniary interest, they declare it now or at the appropriate time. Seeing none, we'll move on into the public meeting, and I'll turn it over to Chris to lead us through the two items in the public agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. These are two applications. They're both public meetings and amendments to the Bruce County official plan. And the first is in town of South Bruce Peninsula, and Jack Van Dorp is the planner on the file, and he's going to provide you with a recommendation on that. But first of all, I'll give you some background about the application, and after Jack has given the report, there'll be an opportunity for questions from council, and then open it up to the public.
Thanks, Chris. The application we're dealing with today is an application for a official plan amendment related to a proposed quarry, and this is located in the northerly part of the town of South Bruce Peninsula. You can see the air photo there. You can see to the north is an existing licensed quarry, and to the west is an existing licensed quarry. And to the south is agricultural lands, and across the road is some forest. The application is required to add a pits and quarries designation on to the county official plan, local official plan amendment to allow a quarry on the property to come into effect, and that would allow the zoning bylaw to come into effect, and all of that would allow the Aggregate Resources Act license to be issued. We've reviewed this application. We've had a public meeting at the town of South Bruce Peninsula back in October, and the town has passed the local plan amendment, and that'll be on this agenda as a separate item. When we're looking at this application, we have to look at the provincial policy statement. It generally protects mineral resource areas and says that as much of the product as possible needs to be made available as close to markets as possible. We also have to minimize the social, economic, and where they are appropriate, and use progressive and final rehabilitation to accommodate subsequent land uses, compatibility with other land uses, and recognize the interim nature of extraction. It also encourages some comprehensive rehabilitation planning. And this is an area where we have a cluster of quarries. We have a bit of a challenge in getting the comprehensive plan because we have some natural heritage features we have to take into account. We also have an unopened road allowance between some of the operations. This operation is expected to be be active for approximately 300 years based on the available amount of resource and the rate of extraction. So we've worked with the applicant, with the Ministry of Natural Resources, their various consultants, to limit the overall disturbance at any given time, and to avoid impacts on significant woodlands and some of the other natural features that are identified. We also have obligations in the PPS to, there's some items in the PPS regarding First Nations interests. In this application, we've reviewed those, and this application does meet those interests in respect of the provincial policy statement. When we get to the county official plan, there's a number of criteria that we have to evaluate when it comes to a quarry. So we have evaluated this application against those criteria, and in summary, the application meets those criteria. We also have a First Nations public participation section in the official plan. We provided that for you in Appendix D. This section recognizes the interests of First Nations in new development proposals, common areas of concern in respect of potential impacts of development, limitations of the current process, and an interim approach to consultation with First Nations. And I'm highlighting this because prior to actually receiving the application, SON sent a letter to the applicant on which the county was copied. And this letter is attached for you as Appendix E to this report. And their letter generally states concerns with potential impacts of the proposed quarry, cumulative impacts of extraction operations within SON's traditional territories. They're concerned about that. We want to note that there were a number of studies prepared and filed by the proponent in support of the application. And on balance, the department is satisfied that if the mitigation measures of these studies are implemented through the ARA license conditions, then the potential impacts of the operation on lands and waters can be mitigated. We should say, however, that neither our plan, the PPS, or the ARA consider broader cumulative impacts of these quarry operations. The second issue of concern in the SON letter is related to development and implementation of an acceptable consultation process between the Crown and the First Nation, and this is a matter that rests solely with the Crown. We note SON's dissatisfaction with the process, but at the same time we recognize that there is a statutory obligation to move the Planning Act applications through the required process. The County of Bruce has been in discussion with SON with the goal of improving consultation. However, there is no agreement currently in place, and in the interim we circulate SON on all new development applications, and that's notwithstanding their proximity to reserve lands, which is the Planning Act and our official plan have a indication that notice is required within a kilometer of a reserve, and we send them absolutely everything. We also understand there's a process in place through the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry for licensing quarries, and that First Nations are consulted during and throughout the Aggregate Resources Act licensing process. We are aware that this process is in place, but we're not sure if it in and of itself satisfies SON's requirements for consultation on this application or others. So on balance, in this respect, we do believe that there is a statutory obligation to proceed with a decision on the application. We already noted the South Bruce Peninsula Plan Amendment was required, and that a meeting was held for that. In terms of agency circulation, the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority is satisfied with the application and the various conditions on it. MNRF had initially had an objection, but through working with the applicants, they've managed to resolve that objection in respect of some species at risk. And when we get to briefly some of the other matters, we know that normally we use a compliance report, and that has some shortcomings when it comes to the specific mitigation measures for quarries. And so we've worked with the applicants, and they've prepared an additional tool for the ministry to use for that purpose. So on balance, we're satisfied with the application, subject to anything that may arise here today, and recommend that it be approved as a schedule change to the official plan.
Thank you very much, Jack. Questions from council? Thank you. Seeing none, then I believe there is a recommendation before you. I would need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Milt, seconded by Mike. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. On to the next one.
This is additionally an amendment to the official plan, and Dana Kiefer is the planner on the file. Same process as last time. Staff report, questions from council, open it up to members of the public for any questions and the resolution. Dana?
Good morning. The application before you is an amendment to the county official plan. The application is for a surplus farm dwelling severance off of a 50-acre parcel. The county official plan states that original Crown surveyed lots shall not be divided into more than 2 parcels, including the retained portion, and that farm lots created or retained shall be generally 40 hectares, which is about 100 acres. In the case of this particular application, the 50-acre farm is being merged with the adjacent farm. The applicant owns several farms along the block, so they will all be merged as one large agricultural parcel. The application was made by Tony Lang Farms Limited, and it is for the north half of Lot 15, Concession 10, South Bruce, geographic township of Culross. The land to be severed is 2.15 acres. So this land with joint applications will be rezoned from A1 General Agriculture to A1 Special to put a livestock restriction on the land, and the retained will be rezoned to not permit a house as per normal surplus farm dwelling severance practice. As you can see on the aerial photo, included in the severed portion will be the house and the barn. It is kept to a minimum and not taking any agricultural land out of production. From agency circulations, we received minimal comments and concerns and have no outstanding concerns with those regards. In particular, the provincial policy statement states that lot creation in agricultural areas is permitted for a resident surplus to farming operation as a result of farm consolidation. This application, we feel, meets the PPS and it meets all MDS 1 requirements. Other than that, the applicant is most definitely a bona fide farmer and owns and farms other lands and owns another house and therefore meets all other policies of the official plan. Therefore, the recommendation before you is to approve this official plan amendment and permit the surplus farm dwelling severance to go forward.
Thank you, Dana. Questions from council? Thank you. Seeing none, we have a recommendation. I need a mover, Ann, and seconded by Robert. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. That brings the public meeting to an end, and we have one delegation this morning. We welcome Todd White, Executive Director, Canadian Radio Communications, Information and Notification Service. Welcome, Todd.
Can I give a brief introduction?
Yes.
To Todd?
Yeah.
Just a way of a brief introduction, because people might be thinking, who is Todd and where county level. I believe we actually don't even receive notice as an upper tier, but at the same time still being asked for information from the local municipalities in terms of how this should be done. So Todd's service is really something that's very relevant to the local municipalities, and some potential here for local municipalities to sort of standardize their outlook in terms of the review processes through a system and service that Todd is offering. So Todd, I'll turn it over to you and let you describe what you're up to.
Okay, and Chris, can I get you to launch that PowerPoint with an F5, I think?
Slideshow.
There we go. And we'll see if this actually works. If I can get it to move forward and backwards. Is there something I need to do here? Oh, there we go. Let's see. And there we go. All right. So Chair Inglis, and through you to the committee, good morning. The reason I'm here is this is actually a follow-on to a presentation that I provided to Bruce County and Grey County planning staff back in June. And CRINS, the organization, is going through county by county throughout Ontario, talking to all the municipalities and the county councils to try to provide a consistent approach to dealing with radio communication systems. So I'll start by explaining what we're here to talk about. And we use the term antenna systems. Antenna systems actually are for a lot more than just cell towers. There certainly are cell towers, Bell, Telus, Rogers. But there's also public safety towers, there's broadcasting installations, and fire departments, private companies have towers, wireless broadband. All of these antenna systems are part of radio communications. And in Canada, radio communications is technically a federal undertaking, so it's all enabled under the Radio Communications Act, which puts radio communication sites outside of the control of municipal bylaws and provincial land use controls. Now, that having been said, the Minister of Industry provides a mechanism for local input to the municipal units. And part of that is done through what is known as Industry Canada Client Procedure Circular 2003. So this is part of what we're going to be talking about this morning, and I'll take you through this. To start, the Canadian Radio Communications Information Notification Service, very long name, we always call it CRINS, is a not-for-profit corporation that's actually owned by municipalities. We represent over 250 municipalities across the country currently. Ontario has been our drive for our membership this year, but we go everywhere from Salmon Arms, BC to Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, throughout that. So we're actually owned by municipalities, considered a paramunicipal organization. Membership is limited to municipalities and provincial government agencies that have land use controls or land use authority. So we have There's no private ownership. There's no ownership by the federal government. There's no ownership by industry. We are intended to be a neutral third party that looks at these applications but represents the municipality's interests. So we're sort of an extension to the local municipalities' planning staff. We're there to provide extra support. So we have lawyers on staff, engineers on staff, planning expertise on staff, etc. We were started, basically, we were conceived in 2011, and we were launched in 2012. And again, we have now, currently, we're starting to push about 300 members across the country. As I indicated, we are an expert staff that helps support our municipal members. We do a lot of work with the public. We educate quite often, because of this jurisdictional issue, whenever a tower comes up, the public tends to contact the local municipality and the local planning staff, even though it's technically not their jurisdiction. And so what that does is the public are so used to having all development applications go through the local municipality, they don't understand that there's this federal component. And that's both a source of confusion for the public. It's also a source of frustration for local municipalities and planning staff, because they are being asked to provide advice on things that they really don't have direct input into in some cases. So we intend to deal with the public on a lot of these issues. We also manage the public consultation process on behalf of our municipal members. So when a tower application comes into a CRINS jurisdiction, we actually control that process end to end, and that's been kind of important because the default rules that are in place by Industry Canada are not very detailed. They don't provide a lot of information to the public. Most people would consider it a substandard consultation process relative to what you're used to in dealing with your municipal applications. So our process is a lot more robust, and I believe you have a copy of the protocol that we use in all of our jurisdictions. So it doesn't matter whether the application is being submitted in Pictou, Nova Scotia, or the City of Guelph, or Meaford, Ontario. All of the applications are evaluated in the same consistent way. When we conduct the public consultation, we then take the results of that public consultation and the inputs from the local municipality and the planning staff, and we present that back to proponents in Industry Canada. Quite often, there are alterations to the plans to build towers that we help support. We also, if there's ever an adjudication process called the impasse process, if a municipality says, no, we don't want a tower, and the proponent wants to push it up to Industry Canada for a decision, we end up representing the municipality in that regard. I'm pleased to say that in 500 applications, we've never been overturned by Industry Canada. Generally, if we say no to a tower, it's accepted at face value. So we've had a very good track record. As I indicate here, one of the things that has been very confusing for the public and sometimes for council is that the provincial and municipal bylaws do not apply to radio communications. So zoning is rendered inoperative, official plans are rendered inoperative, radio communications towers are controlled at the federal level. That said, within the in the Radio Communications Act, there's a section here you'll see that I have highlighted. The minister has the right to approve each site on which radio apparatus, including antenna systems, may be located. So the minister has the final decision. That said, the minister does seek input from the local municipality, but reserves the right to, overrule if that's the case. So this next slide sort of gives you a sense of the challenge. We use this slide quite often when we're explaining this to people. If you were to build a tower, and certainly I know you have lots of wind turbines here in Bruce County, every aspect of building that structure, if you did not put a radio on the top of the tower, every aspect of that development would fall under provincial and municipal controls, because it deals with land use, it deals with practice of professional engineering, it deals with building codes, it deals with occupational health and safety, etc. But as soon as you take a 200-foot tower and put a radio on the top of it, could be the size of a pizza box, all of a sudden, all jurisdiction on that structure leaves the municipality and goes to the federal government. So that's how ridiculous this can be sometimes, is that 95% of the matters that are being affected are actually provincial and municipal in nature, but as soon as that radio goes on the top, you don't have the final say anymore. And this has been a challenge for a lot of people to understand. And certainly when we're doing an evaluation of towers, we're looking at all of these aspects, including conservation, including First Nation land claims, et cetera. And we're actually enforcing those laws and regulations from the province and the municipality, and we apply those to those towers. And done correctly, the federal government has been very receptive to that input. So just to give you a sense of some of the challenges, when people come with proposals, and this is very much driven by cell phones most of the time, is that the location of towers are driven by an engineering problem. In other words, an engineer sitting in an office someplace decides they need to improve cell phone coverage in an area, and they take a pin and they put it in the map and they say, let's build a tower there. And as long as the simulation software shows that it'll provide signal, that's where they want it. So they send a consultant out into the field and they say, go find me a tower somewhere within 500 meters or 2 kilometers or whatever the search radius is of this location. And so the consultant goes out and tries to find a willing landowner to host this site. Unfortunately, electrical engineers know nothing about planning. They don't look at planning policy. So when they put that little pin in the map, they're not looking at whether it's a conservation district. They don't look at any of these things. So one of the problems is that's why engineering and planning policy don't always go together. And so that's where a lot of the challenges are. The need for towers is being driven by data. We all have smartphones. Most people are getting their emails on their phones. They're getting a lot of text messages and watching videos. That's what's driving the need for towers. If this was 20 years ago, you used to see 300, 400-foot towers, and they'd be 50 kilometers apart, and that was what was needed to get a basic phone call through. Now you're seeing a lot of towers, 30, 40 meters, much shorter towers, but every 1, 2, 3 kilometers being placed throughout jurisdictions. And that's because of the need for extra data capacity. In some of the more urban areas, you're seeing antenna systems being placed on rooftops. And those are, by Industry Canada's rules, exempt from consultation. So in other words, the proponent doesn't even need to come to the local municipality and ask for permission to put it on the rooftop. They don't even need a building permit, just so you're aware. Their building permits are not required for radio communications facilities. So that has been a problem and a challenge that we've had to deal with because when there's no building permits, one of the challenges is MPAC doesn't reassess the property, and you're putting $300,000, $400,000 of value on the top of this property, but MPAC isn't even aware of it. And in fact, we did a task force with MPAC in 2014, where MPAC, we have a database of every tower in the country and every installation, and we compared it to what MPAC has in their database. And in fact, MPAC was aware of less than 30% of the structures in Ontario. And that's through no fault of MPAC. That's not their problem. It's the fact that the proponents weren't coming for building permits to the local municipality. That didn't trigger a reassessment, and therefore MPAC is working with less than perfect information. In fact, that has now been, a report is now in front of the Minister of Finance to try to correct that as part of it. So that's just an example of one of the sort of services that we've done for our members. Whenever a tower is put into a location, one of the big issues is visual amenity. What do these things look like? Is it affecting the landscape, etc.? We have a system which we call the Antenna Siting Design Framework. I'd like to say that we came up with it, but in fact it's a modification of a system used in the United Kingdom called the traffic light model. And it's designed to provide a quantitative scoring system for towers. And we use that to inform the types of consultation and the efforts we go through when evaluating these proposals. And what it has proven is it's a bit of a carrot and stick approach. When we go and we score these towers, they usually end up as either being a low, medium, or high level of change. And we adjust the amount of consultation that is required based on how contentious this site is. In doing that, what ends up happening is that proponents will choose their sites more carefully because they want to get their sites done quickly, and if they pick a poor place and it turns out to have a high degree of visual change, then they know that their consultation process is going to be that much longer, and that's going to cost them money. So they're actually starting to choose their sites a bit more effectively. So, you know, in terms of our service goals, we try to, some people think, oh, well, CRINS is here to stop towers. That's absolutely not the case. Our job is to find the best place for towers. Wireless infrastructure is beneficial to most municipalities. It's an economic driver. It supports business, supports, you know, public safety in terms of 911 calls, etc. So we're not there to stop towers, but there's a right way and a wrong way to do these things, and that's what we try to achieve. So we try to work well with both the public and the proponents and the land use authorities. We do have quite a lot of education that we do for the public. We provide a lot of transparent disclosure. All of the applications we do, we keep them, all the information online for 7 years through our website. And we provide a sort of an audit trail. In fact, when we started this process through the scoring of that ASDF system, because we've scored over 500 applications, we actually now provide a report card back to Industry Canada on which proponents are doing a good job, which consultants are doing a good job. So, and now Industry Canada is seeking that input to understand what the industry is doing. So that's been very beneficial. So the purpose of this presentation, and me walking through this, was to extend an invitation to each of your municipalities to participate in CRINS. Now, the first question is, how much does it cost? Absolutely nothing. It costs you nothing to participate in CRINS. How we are funded is that whenever a proponent submits an application, we collect an application fee. That application fee has two components to it: a fee that CRINS itself uses to fund operations, but we also make sure that each municipality is paid for the time of their planning staff. So in other words, every single one of our applications, the local municipality might say, well, we need to recover $800 of costs because that's what it's going to cost our staff to deal with this. We take that amount, and our fees for this year were $1,600, so we'd combine those, and that would become the application fee that the proponent would pay for an application. So it costs you nothing to participate, but that's how we achieve the cost recovery. To become a member of CRINS is actually very simple. We simply ask that each municipality pass a motion to participate. You authorize CRINS and its staff to act on your behalf in terms of dealing with these applications. You adopt the protocol, which you all have a copy of. And the fourth thing is we set the fee. If we get that motion from a local municipality, we have something called a joining letter, which is just a letter that has some wording in there to tell Industry Canada that we now will represent the municipality when an application comes in. And that's it. There's no contracts, there's nothing else to it. If we serve at the pleasure of councils, we unserve just as easily. If you decided the next day you didn't want to participate in CRINS, you just send us a letter and say that's it. So, but we've never had a municipality ever back out yet, so I think we're in a good shape. So at this point, I'd be happy to entertain questions from anybody.
Thank you very much, Todd. Are there questions? Yes, Milt?
Thank you. Yeah, you said if a municipality does not support the application, and then you have never been overturned.
Yes.
So do you work with the federal government to look at other locations, or is that just abandoned, that application?
No, what happens is when an application comes in, if I walk you through the process, so the application will come in, we'll come and work with the local planners. And usually if there's a problem, you know, it's in a heritage district or something like that, we identify that right up front and we send it back to the proponent and say, look, you've got to find a different spot. We won't even go out to the public because there's no use going through that. Generally speaking, we can find accommodations. We'll sit down and try to find another location. If that location's bad, and we'll try to find another location. Now, the challenge is you have to have a willing landowner. And in fact, we just went to a Supreme Court case in October where the city of Chateauguay, Quebec, actually ended up expropriating land to move a tower, which was kind of the first time that's ever been done, where a local municipality actually expropriated private land to move a tower away from a residence. And that's we're still waiting for the decision on that. But so generally, we do try to find other spots if it's convenient, but it has to meet the technical objective of the proponent. That's the first order of business. As long as we have a technical solution that'll work for Rogers or Bell or whomever it is, then there's some flexibility as to where that tower is. You know, they say, oh, well, we want the tower in this spot. It doesn't generally have to be that exact. You can usually move it by a few hundred meters or a kilometer and still achieve the same end goal. It's just the challenge of finding the willing landowner that's the issue.
So it does normally happen because the service is needed.
That's right.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's not a matter of stopping the tower, it's a matter of finding the right place for it.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
So have you been involved in trying to camouflage the tower?
We do that all the time.
What are some of the things, how do you camouflage it? I was just interested.
Well, it depends on the height of the structure. I mean, if it happens to be not that much taller or within a reasonable distance above the tree line, there are things like you can make cell towers look like trees. We've had cell towers made into clock towers when somebody wants to put an antenna system in the middle of town, and we say, well, you can't just put a tower, you have to disguise it as something. So if it's on rooftops, we make them put fiberglass enclosures to make them look like chimneys. There's all kinds of different things that you can do. Towers tend to be, you know, instead of an ugly steel lattice tower that's, you know, white and red, you can quite often change it to, you know, a neutral gray, use a monopole as compared to a tower. There's actually about 14 or 15 different structure types. Most people think there's only two types, you know, monopoles and lattice towers, but there's actually quite a few options. And if they're on buildings, which happen in built-up areas like towns and villages, there's all kinds of ways to disguise them to make them look like air conditioning units, chimneys, you know, steeples. I mean, we put them in louvers in steeples of churches, and you'd never know. And that's because they can form things in fiberglass and color match.
Well, that's very interesting. We did have, I can see where your service would be a benefit. We had quite a controversy over one in the town of Kincardine, but it got resolved, but it took a staff's time again, and it would have been better if we'd had more expertise, I think, at the start.
One of the things that my understanding is that none of the municipalities in Bruce County have their own protocol in place, and something I should mention is that currently, if a municipality doesn't have its own protocol in place, there's something called the Industry Canada default process, which is in that document that I mentioned earlier. And basically, you're kind of abrogating your input and your jurisdiction on these matters. And so Industry Canada itself even says, we'd like to see all municipalities have their own protocol in place. And the protocol that that you have a copy of is considered one of the most robust ones. In fact, in 2013, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities used the CRINS protocol as one of the source documents for the template that they've published across Canada for use. So it's quite robust.
Thank you.
Yes, Janice?
Thank you. So with a new tower, I can see some sort of a camouflaging, like right from the beginning through the design, but is there something that we can do for existing towers now? Is there any way to go back and have something done? Because we've got several that are in very prominent places that, that are quite unattractive.
Realistically speaking, retroactively doing it is very challenging. Quite frankly, there's nothing to compel the proponents to do that. I mean, there's no way you can, if you had it as a condition of concurrence up front, then yes, you definitely have your controls. You know, sometimes they'll do things for goodwill, and sometimes we've had those conversations, you know, this tower really wasn't done very well. Could you clean this up first? You know, it would make it easier to get this next tower through, right? So, I mean, we try to apply some, you know, gentle persuasion in some of these cases, but there's certainly no regulatory way of pushing them to fix something that's happened.
Okay, are there any other questions? Yes, Chris?
One of the things we've had difficulties dealing with in the past is this idea of co-location.
Yes.
And as a planner, you would look at the neighborhood and say there's a couple of towers, they're owned by Company A, and Company B, because it's a competitive market, needs access in the same neighborhood. And when we ask about co-location or suggest co-location, it's just, it's not going to happen.
Right.
So under your, within your experience and through this protocol, is there methodologies to require that or push the agenda?
Absolutely. So let's, co-location, first off, is a requirement. They are required by law and as part of their spectrum license to co-locate where possible before they build a new tower. Now, there's all kinds of reasons they don't want to. First off, we still have this sort of infrastructure competition in Canada. In the United States and elsewhere, people share towers all the time. In Canada, you know, Bell wants to hold onto their network, Rogers wants to hold onto their network. And Industry Canada has been trying to break that. When a proponent comes to us and says, we have to have a new tower, we ask them, have you considered co-location? They'll often say, oh, no, we can't, it doesn't work. Now, most planners don't have the expertise on staff to challenge that assessment. We do, because we have electrical engineers on staff. So we'll actually go out and run the simulations and say, well, look, this tower will give you 85% of what you're asking for. Why can't you use that? You know, and fill it in. So we're in a position to challenge the assertions that they're making, where most planners don't have the electrical expertise, engineering expertise on staff. So we always ask about co-location. It's a requirement at the federal level. We challenge them when they say they can't. And quite often, when CRINS first started as an organization, they would say the same things to us that they would say to most municipalities. Now they know if it's a CRINS jurisdiction, they better have their ducks in order because we're going to check that up front. So we generally don't have problems. There's quite often they'll just say, yeah, we're going to co-locate, and that's it. So they don't even try to pull a tower on us that way.
Okay. Kelly.
Through you, Mr. Chair. You mentioned that there's a $1,600 fee for the application. I wonder, how do you get your authority to charge the fee and collect it?
Industry Canada. It's a federal undertaking, so the application of the fees is dictated. Industry Canada supports that. Their view is that a municipality has the right to recover all the costs associated with providing the input to those proposals. So a municipality is authorized to collect fees, and we, as CRINS, it was actually challenged when we started. The question was being asked of us exactly that. Well, the proponent said, well, we don't have to pay these fees. You don't have the right. And Industry Canada came back and said, yes, you do. We demand that you reimburse the cost.
So just for clarity, if I'm understanding what you've just articulated, the fee is collected by the municipality and then transferred to you?
No, incorrect. We collect all the fees, and then we give the fee to the municipality, whatever that amount is. So in other words, if you decide that a municipality or local municipality needs to recover $800, then we add that to the $1,600. That would be $2,400. So they would pay us the $2,400. We turn around and give you a check for $800. So that's how it works.
Okay, so you receive the authority through your organization, your letters of incorporation for the not-for-profit. You have the authority to charge a fee.
By Industry Canada, yeah.
Okay, yes, Paul has a question.
Just for clarity, your definition of local municipality, do you mean like the county of Bruce is the local municipality?
No, not the upper tiers. It has to be at the individual local municipality. So I guess it would be South Bruce and et cetera, Bruce Peninsula, et cetera. So it's at the local municipality, not the upper tier, because it's whoever is the land use authority, whoever deals with planning. Now I understand that I guess you all share planners here in Bruce County, correct? So I guess it would just be one staff. So But typically, the authority to provide planning services or to deal with the planning is done at the local municipal level. Obviously, the upper tier municipality, if they have land use authority, so specific pieces of land that they have responsibility for, then of course they could become a member. But actually, of all the Ontario municipalities and actually across the country, most of them they're all lower tier, except for unincorporated areas, and in those cases, it's quite often the province.
Janice?
Sorry, quick last question. Are there any other companies that provide the same service that you do?
No. No, I mean, again, we're a not-for-profit, so it's not a profit-making, exercise that we're going through. And again, we're owned by our municipal members, so it's really just like it's like a planning board or a planning commission. It's basically what you're coming down to. In Ontario, you would create water utilities or planning boards, etc. Same thing. And in the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, I mean, when we set this up, we looked and said, well, do municipalities have the right to join even, right? It's usually one of the questions. And you do have it under section 20 and 23 and 19. So that's how it works.
Okay, thank you, Todd.
Okay.
It seems that all of our municipalities, lower tier, certainly should consider becoming a member. CRINS offers quite a bit of expertise, I can see.
Thank you very much.
And it would be beneficial.
Okay, great.
Thank you. The action items, the first one is South Bruce Peninsula Official Plan Amendment.
So as you heard previously, there was 2 amendments submitted on the same property to permit a quarry. And the applicant is Hunter Hollage in care of Ron Davidson. And we have 2 municipalities in the county that have plan coverage in the countryside, one being here in Kinloss, and secondly, South Bruce Peninsula. And in this plan, in this case, both of them are what I would call status quo plans. And in order to get your designation for a pit or a quarry, you would go through the review criteria in order to get that. So this application was submitted, it was reviewed by the municipality, and they held the public meeting associated with the application. And on the basis of the review that was undertaken, again similar to in the previous report, there's a recommendation that the application be approved, and subsequently the bylaws were passed. And so the amendment and the recommendation then in the staff report is that amendment number 42 to the Town of South Bruce Peninsula official plan be adopted. Approved, sorry.
Thanks, Chris. You've heard the recommendation. Can I have a mover? Milt and Ann, any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And the next item, support letter for Huron Fringe Birding Festival.
Yes, simply a recommendation. They're asking for a letter of support, so a council resolution providing that support for a worthy community initiative.
And we have a motion, recommendation, moved by Ann, seconded by Mitch. Any discussion? Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment. This is a festival that has really grown in popularity in the last few years, and it started it's kind of interesting. It started a group of private citizens and friends of the park, and it spread all across the county. You'll see them from the whole length of the county. They'll bring people from, it was interesting, I know when we had the plovers at Saugeen Shores, we had people from as far away as Georgia coming to see these things nested on our beach. So it's something that doesn't have a real profile in our community, but it is amazing the number of people that it brings to our community on that week, and it's a great event.
Good. Mitch?
Put some kind of clause in their driving. I was following about 10 cars the other day on Lake Range Drive, and all of a sudden they just veered off onto the side of the road, stopped, jumped out, and they were all, so I don't know if there's anything we can add to that.
That's good. Okay, it should be safety first.
Safety.
All right. All those in favor of that motion to support? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. And closed session? Is that?
Closed session, so we have a guest for a closed session delegation coming at 11, and so we can cover off the rest of the agenda items before then. So we'll go up to...
Okay.
Yep.
So we're going on to the information items. The first one is the Bruce grant update. And is that Kara?
Yeah,
Or
so
not?
I'll ask, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll ask Kara to give a bit of an update, and this is, the report is under the protocol in terms of the funding applications. We have a process where we come back and report on the successful applications. And so I'll ask Kara to give a review of the financials on that end and give a bit of an update on the Spruce the Bruce program for this year.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. We were in committee in November with the first one of these reports, and this is the second one that I mentioned would be back to you in December. This is, as Chris mentioned, our protocol in order to award the grant recipients with the funding for the county portion, and we're also the deliverer of the funding on behalf of the town of South Bruce Peninsula. They contribute 1/3 funding to the projects in their community as well. So this report is for the final payment of just over $42,000 that would go out to a number of different applicants that are in the table that have been provided. So you can see the various applicants. So that's in addition to the ones that you saw in November. So the total grants that went out for 2015 are around the $58,000 mark. So as we noted to you in the November report, this is under what we've seen in past years, and that was due to some staffing that we didn't have in place at the beginning of the year, and some of the grants sort of being underway and us not being able to partner to those communities that already had their grants underway earlier on in the year. So we will be back in January or early February with a report to committee that sort of summarizes the grants and the participation and gives you a bit of an annual report with what's happened in 2015 with Spruce the Bruce and where we're looking at going in 2016. But this was really meant as an update to the committee on the funding allotments that had happened in 2015. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kara, for the update. Any questions? Ann?
Just a comment. The signage, the perpendicular signage program, when I was deputy mayor, they were talking about it, and I thought, wow, Kincardine town looks pretty good. They were all enthused. But I can see why now that it is up. It is a real addition to have that perpendicular signage, and it just seemed to be the incentive for a lot of store owners to get on board with it. But I think it's a real nice addition to our downtown in Kincardine. So I really appreciate the Spruce the Bruce program, over the years. But that's been one of the best, I thought, for us.
Thank you. I think my municipality probably has taken advantage of this program more than any other. And Ann, I love the perpendicular signage too in Kincardine. That's really impressive. It's a really important program for my municipality. It's made a substantial difference in the downtown core of Wyerton and Sauble Beach. And it's impressive. It seems to have sparked a lot of pride in our communities now when they walk down, our main streets and see these improved facades. I have to admit, I did not realize that streetscape beautification fell underneath this program, and we certainly have a lot of that in the very near future that we're going to be taking advantage of. So I love this program. I'm so happy that Bruce County offers it, and we do partner with financial matching funds as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Janice. I think we all agree. Spruced up our downtowns. Any other comments, questions received for information? The next one is the Source Water Protection Agreement, which has been attached.
So most of you have received the notices in the mail regarding the approval of the plan, and I know many around the room have been participating within that system, either on the board or through the technical committees. It comes into effect on July 1st in 2016, and then everybody has within about a 4-year time frame to implement the recommendations or the requirements under the source water protection plan. So the actual assessment reports for the 3 source protection areas, that's being Saugeen Valley, Grey Salba, and Northern Bruce Peninsula, were approved by the director on October 15th. So from the county perspective, our involvement has been in a number of different levels, but for the most part, through the legislative requirements, many of the responsibilities fall within the hands of local municipalities as opposed to the upper tier. Some of our staff had worked in the background on the technical committee, working with chief building officials, conservation authority folks and the like, in terms of making recommendations in terms of how some of this should play out. The main thing, I guess, in terms of the county perspective under the analysis section of the report, there's a few changes that are required to the county official plan. When the original source water protection study was done, there were some preliminary recommendations that were included in the county plan and also some preliminary net mapping, and that needs to be updated and refreshed. One of the requirements that came out of the source water protection legislation is a requirement for signage, and you'll see these signs as you head through other jurisdictions down through Halton, Peel, and so on, and the signs on the side of the road indicating that it's a drinking water protection area. And this is one of the requirements that's come out of our plan, that these signs be posted. And so we've had some discussions with the Highways Department in terms of the timing of that and how it could be done. As part of the funding that came to the upper tier, there's funding available that would cover costs associated with updating plans and documents at the county level. And additionally, there's direct capital funding available for the manufacture installation of the source water protection signs. Early in the year, there was an extension approval to the agreement for source water protection for the funding. And the revised deadline then for the previous monies is December 7th, 2016. The one other project that we had worked on, this is the first round of funding, that I believe there was about $64,000 that came to the county and for implementation, and we discussed that at a staff level and recognized we don't really have much to implement. So we talked with Grey County, and we came up with a proposal looking at ways of helping local municipalities implement some of their requirements when this comes along. And surprisingly enough, province-wide, there's really no databases or forms or web forms or any of the paperwork that would be required for the risk management officials. So the proposal at the Grey Bruce level then was to assist local municipalities come up with what was called RMO in a box. And this is, again, development of the forms and the databases and the tracking systems that can be used by the local municipalities. And so there's a partnership agreement between Grey and Bruce that we help out and assist with that. The first phase of the project was the administrative documents, and that's been delivered to all of the partners at the local level. And then the second phase of the project is the tracking system. So, when permits have been issued, how do you find them, where are they, when were they updated, file numbers, and so on and so forth. So it's using existing GIS resources within Grey and Bruce County, held at the county level, to assist with a different viewer. And this view will show basically the tracking aspects of the actual permits, where they're located, legal information, dates, and so on and so forth. So at this point, in terms of financial implications, the province has granted the extension until the end of 2016, and this is recognition that we're one of the later jurisdictions to have the source water protection plans approved. In terms of staffing, from the Highways perspective, they're aware that they have this obligation under the plan to install road signs at those locations identified in the plan. And any costs incurred during the 2016 calendar year for them would be eligible for payment under the source water implementation fund. And other than that, there's no additional staffing requirements. So I think it was a good project in terms of working with the municipalities, although not directly our statutory authority, but to work with them to try to improve some efficiencies in terms of how the service is delivered or create some efficiencies, looking for some economies of scale with our municipal partners, and to be able to coordinate our efforts with other agencies, including the conservation authorities, local municipalities, MOE, and the like. That's presented for information purposes.
Thank you, Chris. Any questions from anyone? Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris, I'm interested in this property tracking system. How does this, there's a number, and the reason I'm asking this because we're struggling with this at the Conservation Authority about finding a way of identifying particular properties, and I just wonder, is there some uniform way that we can all do this so that it would be easy to track from, you know, planning and source water protection and regulated areas and that type of thing? Because they struggle with, and to be honest with you, I really don't understand the issues that much, because they're looking at trying to look, and the process that they're using, if you just a second, or trying to, I think we're going to implement is, they've got some type of a software program that will identify through GIS the central point of a piece of property, and that's what they're going to use. It'll be a GIS number, I guess. Anyways, I think I probably said enough to...
It's actually, because of the way that the technology was developed in the early days, it's fairly straightforward. When the province got out of the business of doing parcel maps for assessment purposes, and that was turned over to, eventually to MPAC, the county digitized all of the parcel fabric. So this is, in many cases, legal surveys and also guesses and estimates from the old paper copies of the assessment maps. And then each individual parcel is assigned, it has a unique identifier, and whether that be the roll number or the street address through 911, there's a couple of ways to get at it. And then you can look at a property on a map. It's a 100-acre block, and it's a closed polygon. It's a box, and that box can contain unlimited amount of information. So if you go to our GIS system right now, the parcel fabric is already linked with the assessment data, and you can look at it. It has all the information about the property. Under the protected view, you can see the full roll associated with that, but there's also a public view that has a lot in concession and so on and so forth. I would say in terms of complexity, it's not all that complex to do it. It's just timing and resources and making sure. These things often fall down by the creation of a duplicate database where there's already a database that exists, and so potentially you partner with somebody else. And so certainly at the county level, our system is very well set up to do what the Conservation Authority is talking about in terms of tracking. And it'd be a question of a request from the Conservation Authority to explore with us that, doing that. And Grey County runs a very similar system as well. You look back to the early days of GIS in the county, it cost a lot of money to set this up. And there was a lot of things done manually in terms of taking all the layers and digitizing them from paper copy maps. The end result has been a very robust system that is very adaptable to do the kinds of things that you're talking about without repeating work that's already been done.
Anyone else? I know the lower tiers certainly appreciate the support from the county on all of this. It's been quite a process, and we appreciate what the county has done in helping this through. Kelly, did you have a comment?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just in terms of next steps, if you wish to recess, I don't think there's anything left on the agenda besides the closed session item. And then if the Chair of Highways wishes to convene the Highways Committee, we could do that in lead up to the 11 o'clock closed session, if that's agreeable.
That's what we'll do. We'll recess planning and development and come back at the scheduled time at 11 or thereabouts and carry on then now with another committee.